Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 21st of November of 2025. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. So during the previous 24 hours, most of the political and military experts were talking about just two things. The first one is the 28-point plan that was provided by the United States of America. States call this plan as a peaceful plan for the peaceful settlement of the conflict. And the second thing that most of the experts were talking about is the significant progress on the ground that the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to show us today. So Russians today captured so many settlements and villages that we haven't seen probably since the beginning of the special military operation. So once again, let's talk about these two things. First, let's talk once again about the 28-point plan. We have already discussed the situation during the previous video, but now after probably a day left, after another day passed, now has become clear what exactly this plan about. So some sources are saying that this is the plan for complete and peaceful settlement of the conflict in Ukraine. But if you ask my opinion, I see that this is not a plan for a peaceful settlement. I see this as a plan for a truth, for a ceasefire period of time or something like this. But this is first of all for a short-term period of time, not for years, not for ages. We need to understand that currently there are just three entities in the world that can decide what to do next with Ukraine. We're talking about the population of Ukraine, people of Ukraine. We're talking about Parliament of Ukraine and the President of Ukraine. And the problem is that currently we're at the situation when the President has no power because basically his terms ended almost 2 years ago. So he cannot do anything with this. The Parliament of Ukraine cannot do anything because currently we see hundreds of cases of corruption around the parliament and around the ministers of different spheres of Ukraine. And the population of Ukraine are completely cut from the running of Ukraine as a state. So that is why the plan 28-point plan is just a plan for ceasefire for the elections. Because both the Russians and the United States of America and the Western countries, the European countries, first of all, they need to carry out elections. So that is why they need to create conditions for these purposes. So and according to this 28-point plan, according to the 25th point, Ukraine will hold elections in 100 days. And during this period of time, and after this period of time, Ukraine will elect parliament, they will elect a president, and people will be involved in the process of running and controlling the state, Ukraine as a state. And only then the next president and the next parliament will have enough of legal power, enough of power to carry out negotiations both with Russians, with Europeans, with the United States of America. And the next president will be legitimate to carry out and to sign documents. So the rest 27 points are about conditions. Every single point we discussed, every single point you read during the day is just a condition for this ceasefire. So during this ceasefire, Ukraine's sovereignty will be affirmed. During this ceasefire, a full and comprehensive non-aggression agreement will be concluded between Russia, Ukraine, and Europe. During this 100-day ceasefire, Russia is expected not to invade neighboring countries like Moldova, and NATO will not expand further. During this ceasefire, the number of Ukraine armed forces will be limited to 600,000 soldiers. During this ceasefire, NATO will not move soldiers and troops on the territory of Ukraine. During this ceasefire, European countries will have the right to move their troops on the territory of Ukraine with the purpose to support Ukraine. During this ceasefire, European fighter jets will be stationed in Poland. During this ceasefire, if Ukraine invades Russia, so most likely after the presidential elections and the parliament elections, Ukraine will lose the guarantee. During this ceasefire, if Russia invades Ukraine, in addition to a decisive, coordinated military response, all global sanctions will be reinstated, a recognition of new territory, and all other benefits of this deal will be revoked. So we are talking about ceasefire, and these 28 points are just conditions how exactly this ceasefire will exist. Of course, this ceasefire can be prolonged even further, but only and after the presidential and parliament elections on the territory of Ukraine, most likely without Zelensky and without his fraction. So this is the situation, and this is a very interesting situation, because also according to this plan, according to probably some paragraph after 20s, the Russian media and Russian sources and Russian people will be allowed to join the political life of Ukraine. So these conditions will allow both pro-Russians and pro-Westerns to fight. I'm not talking about real fight, I'm talking about political fight for the power, for the president chair, for the parliament chairs, and so on. And only then people of Ukraine, a new president of Ukraine and a new parliament of Ukraine will make a decision whether to fight with Russia, whether to continue fighting with Russia, and they can attack deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation. And then, of course, the United States of America will step back without providing any guarantees to Ukraine, or Ukraine can accept Russia's demands and everything will be finished. So this is the situation, and now the question is whether the Russians and the Ukrainians will accept this ceasefire and these conditions for this short ceasefire in 100 days. We will understand during the next days, because according to information we have, by the end of the 27th of November, Zelensky must sign this plan according to the demands of the United States of America. But some sources are saying that most likely he will reject this, or at least they will try to add as many as possible changes, as many as possible different points, with the purpose to improve their positions for this truce, for this 100 days ceasefire that is going to take place right after both the Russians and the Ukrainians sign a document. At the same time, we see that the Russians are not ready for this ceasefire as well, because everything is okay for Russians, reading quotes, of course, I'm talking about this is a war. Everything is okay for Russians along the line of combat contact. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians shown us so many changes, such a big advance along the line of combat contact as we haven't seen since the February or March of 2022, when everything just started, when the Russians were moving and were capturing lots of territories. So let's discuss this in details, and first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. First, we're going to talk about the eastern Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 24 hours, small changes were recorded in this area. According to the group of forces east, they managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Radosnaya. This information today was confirmed both by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and by the group of forces east. Here we can see how exactly the Russians were fighting for the settlement, how Russians were bombing and attacking this territory. And as usually in the videos of this type, the final seconds, we can see in the final part, we can see at least 2 episodes when Russians were raising their flags. So according to this video, Russians raised their flags in 2 points. This is the first flag and this is the second one. So based on this video and based on the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we adjusted the map. We have adjusted the map. This is the situation by the end of the 20th of November, and this is the situation by the end of the 21st of November of 2025. The Russians are saying that they continue advancing further in the direction of the city of Gulay-Polye, and the Russians are confident that most likely Ukrainians will not be able to hold their defense in the area of the city of Gulay-Polye. It seems that this settlement would be captured by Russians much faster than anybody can imagine. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the city of Pokrovsk. As for the previous 24 hours, we haven't received almost anything from this area. Probably the most important updates was made by the chief of the General Staff of the Russian Federation. He stated that 75% of the city of Pokrovsk has been captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. This is a very important number, because I would like to point your attention, and if you check every single map of every single mapper, you might see that either Russia Russians control just 5 or 10% of the city of Pokrovsk and the rest is the gray zone, or Russians control up to 95% and the rest is the gray zone. So as we can see, nobody knows the exact situation on the ground, because today the Minister of Defense and the Chief of the General Staff stated that Russians control just 75%, which means that there are still 25% under the control of Ukraine. Most likely 20% of these 25% are pockets of resistance across the entire city without any connections with the mainland and without any possibilities to get additional supply and support. But anyway, 25% is 25%. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting videos. For example, this video we have already discussed. We discussed this video yesterday. Here we can see how Russian soldiers were moving across the city of Pokrovsk, across the Shakhtarsky micro-district. So this is a very important video, and yesterday the Russians stated that they managed to secure this micro-district, and this is a very important video, and the importance of this video is that Russians were moving in the city, and not just about, let's say, without being afraid of any attacks from Ukrainian side. We see that the Russians in this video have begun improving their positions. They're bringing additional materials, they're bringing additional equipment, they're trying to improve their positions, establish some places where they can sleep, when they can live and eat. So they're concentrating their forces. This video shows, let's say, a civilian life of soldiers during the war period of time. So, which is a very important situation. And the second video, a very important video that you might also see, was published during the previous day. And here we can see how Russian motorcycles were moving in the southern direction towards the city of Selidova. And here we can see lots of prisoners of war, lots of Ukrainians that were captured by Russians. I calculated Ukrainian soldiers in this episode, and I counted up to 14 soldiers that surrendered to the armed force of the Russian Federation. We added this icon softly, but let's assume that Ukrainians were moving from the city of Pokrovsk in the southern direction along M30 road towards the settlement of Selidova. So we believe that something like this is happening exactly in this video. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Konstantinovka direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of updates, and the most important was reported by the head of the Group of Forces South. Russian armed forces have captured 4,000 buildings in Konstantinovka, the commander of the Southern Group of Forces, and also he added that Russians have taken control over the eastern and the southeastern parts of Konstantinovka and have begun clearing the center. Furthermore, he added that most of the town is scheduled to be taken by Russians by mid-December. So it's very difficult to understand what is, let's say, most of the town. What are we talking about? But we believe, and let's project or speculate a bit. So according to the head of the Group of Forces South, by the mid-December of 2025, the Russians most likely will try to take under complete control everything along this red line. So everything along the line and further to the south towards the Kleban-Butskaya water reserve, Ivanopolia, and so on. So this is how the Russians are tasked exactly on this specific direction. As for the real changes on the ground during the previous 24 hours, the most important updates came from the settlement of Ivanopolia. The Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over this territory. Furthermore, the Russians published this video where we can see how exactly the units of the Group of Forces South were fighting for this territory. In this video, we can see lots of episodes, and the most important updates and episodes are coming from the final part of this video, where we can see Russian soldiers that were raising their flags and waving with their flags across the entire through the entire settlement. So based on this video and based on the report that was published by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we adjusted the map. Ukrainians most likely were forced to fall back further in the western direction, and now the Ukrainians are trying to regroup further in the northwestern directions towards the settlements of Bereztovka and Ilinka and Konstantinovka itself. So this is according to the situation around. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Sivers-Liman direction. This is already the area of responsibilities of the Group of Forces South and the Group of Forces West. From this area, we received the biggest number of changes, and let's discuss them in details. First, let's talk about the city of Sivers. The Russians during the previous 24 hours improved their position significantly along and through the settlement of Zvanovka. The territory of the village is about to be taken by Russians completely, and we came to this conclusion based on this video published by a pro-Ukrainian source. And here we can see how Ukrainians, FPV drone operators, were attacking positions of the armed force of the Russian Federation in the northern part of the settlement. Based on this video, we came to conclusion that these, let's say, territories, this Zvanovka pocket was captured by Russians, and the Russians are about to finish the battle for the entire village itself. Furthermore, another important update is coming from the settlement by the name of Yampol. This is the situation by the end of the 20th of November. This is the situation by the end of the 19th of November. This is a very important date because during the 19th of November of 2025, the pro-Ukrainian source reported that the village of Yampol was already inside of the huge, let's say, Liman gray zone. So based on some reports, probably based on some evidences, Ukrainian sources adjusted the map in this area, and on the 19th of November it was a very interesting situation because it was unexpected. But today, on the 21st of November, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and several pro-Russian sources confirmed that the settlement of Yampol was completely captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and the Russians also published this video, and this is a video proof. Here we can see how exactly the clashes were taking place for the settlement, how Russians were bombing and attacking, how Russians were clearing the settlement, and in the final part of this video we can see also probably 6 episodes of how Russian soldiers were raising their flags in different parts of the settlement. So based on this video and based on the report of the Minister of Defense, we adjusted the map. Once again, 20th of November, and this is the 21st of November. So the Liman front line collapsed, obviously, and the Russians will continue offensive operation further and towards the settlements of Ozerna. The Russians will try to advance in the direction of Zakitne, and then even further in the direction of Krivoluka. And most likely then, from these positions, Russians will finish the battle for the city of Siversk, if the battle for the city of Siversk will not be finished by the same time. Additional changes and very important updates are coming from the Liman direction itself. Today, the Minister of Defense also stated that the small micro-district of the city of Liman by the name of Maslyakivka was captured. We haven't adjusted anything because these territories were colored long time ago based on the geolocations that were published before. But today, this information, as you can see, was also confirmed. Furthermore, the Russians finished the battle for the settlement of Stavki, and Russians finished the battle for the settlement of Novoselovka. So this is the situation by the end of the 20th of November, and this is the situation by the end of the 21st of November. We adjusted this part of the map based on the report of the Minister of Defense and based on videos that were published by pro-Russian sources. Here we can see once again how the Group of Forces West were clearing the settlement of Stavki. In this video we can see episodes of close combat between Russians and Ukrainians through the settlement of Stavki, and we can see several flags raised in different parts. The same story took place in the territory of Novoselovka. Once again, lots of episodes of how clashes were taking place through the settlement, and lots of episodes of how Russians were raising flags across and through the settlement as well. So based on these videos and based on the reports, we adjusted the map. So now we see that Russians currently have no more barriers in front of them to attack further deep inside of the Liman direction. The Russians probably have several strongholds in front of them between Stavki and Liman, and there is a settlement of Drobyshevo between Novoselovka, Derilova and Liman itself from the northwestern direction. But I would like to point your attention that several days ago we received reports that the Russians already entered the settlement and that the clashes are taking place currently on the territory of Drobyshevo, which means that most likely the days of Liman are numbered, and most likely the city of Liman would be captured by Russians most likely before the end of the 2025. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kupiansk direction. As for this area, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and the Chief of the General Staff yesterday reported that the city of Kupiansk was captured. And this morning, pro-Russian sources published this video, where we can see the same story, how Russians were fighting through the city. And in the final part of this video as well, we can see lots of flags that Russians raised across the settlement. So lots of episodes, the Minister of Defense report, the report of the Chief of the General Staff. Based on all these things, we adjusted the map. But anyway, we still have some doubts about the most southern part of the settlement because we haven't received anything from this area. We just adjusted the city of Kupiansk according to its city limits, according to, let's say, official data. Furthermore, the Russians stated that they finished the battle for the settlement of Petropavlovka. As for this village, as for this settlement, we haven't received anything during the previous 24 hours. For some reason, the Russians decided not to publish anything about this area. So maybe they will publish in coming days or something, but we adjusted the map in advance. Furthermore, the Minister of Defense stated that up to 16 battalions of the armed forces of Ukraine are currently blocked on the eastern bank of the river Oskol without any chances for evacuation. The President of the Russian Federation asked the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine to prepare and to make every necessary conditions for the surrender of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in Kupiansk and Krasnoarmeysk. So we'll see what is going to be next, but as we discussed a minute ago, the Ukrainians, lots of Ukrainians most likely have already accepted let's say, proposals to surrender, and most likely in coming days we're going to see more and more episodes of this type. As for the northeastern part, as for the Kharkiv direction, the Russians stated that they're also about to secure the settlement of Volchansk. By the end of the 21st of November of 2025, the Russians secured more than 70% of the settlement and the Russians continue advancing. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.